Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Cradle Book 12, Waybound, chapters 28 and 29. In these chapters, well, I've got to admit, I didn't think that the Dread Gods would be all sewn up by this point in the story. And I don't know what to expect now. I really don't. And Rhaegon Shen is dead. It all happened so fast. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy, who is here in the chat, for commissioning this episode. Yeah, guys, I would really love a show of hands. Was anyone else surprised that we take down these Dread Gods at this point? This early? And I say early in quotes because, there are only 3 more episodes of coverage, so it is fairly late, but I thought this was going to be how things ended. I did not think we were going to have this and then a whole other thing after. And now I am really at sea because what I'm really curious about is if our friends ascended without Lyndon, guys, this is just, none of this is what I was expecting. Are we going to get to see what that looks like? How much time are we going to spend with them now that they have ascended versus Lyndon, who is still here stuck on Cradle? I don't know what to do. I really don't. Megan says, yup. I think yup to surprised. B. Moore says, it did feel like the book from a few chapters ago when Lyndon got yoinked to the Dread Gods skipped over a second chunk of the book. Yeah, I don't know. And I'm not, I want to be clear. I don't dislike this. I don't feel like this is bad writing or anything. In fact, I think it's kind of good writing when you are this startled and you thought you knew the pattern things were going to take and then they don't. I always think, if you're managing to keep me on my toes and it doesn't feel contrived, then you're doing something right. At least you're being interesting. I just was really shocked that, the first of the 2 chapters were almost done by then in this section, So I'm going to back up because I am really not, I'm starting in the middle or the end of things. So, Emic Shard is here. Hi. B. Moore says, Will mentioned a few times since Reaper/Dread God that he heavily values stories ending thoroughly. He'd love a long epilogue, half a book long, if he could get away with it. Well, that's really fair. And that is something that I really, really enjoy myself. And I know that, there are times where it can be maybe a little bit of overkill, or it can even feel like, are you setting it up for something else? That's not an inherently bad thing, but you know what I'm talking about. But I know that some of my favorite TV series finales were ones where, for example, a particular favorite of mine is the Parks and Rec series finale, where we jump around to each of our main ensemble cast and see where their lives are now and get a good 5 or 6 minute long scene with them. And really, we have a sense of how they've grown, where they are, things they still need to work on, but stuff that they have succeeded in obstacles that they have overcome. I love that sort of thing. And I have been really curious about like the whole thing with the Abaddon and how exactly that works. So if we get some of that, I'll be really interested. It's just very surprising. So, okay. 28. We start off with Zeal, who is beginning to set up his space for advancing to Herald. And your boy is saying that it's not going to be cooperative, but it's also not going to put up a fight. Zeal, look, I understand this mistake, but you saw its eyes, right? Like, do you know yourself, don't you? Like, no, he doesn't. That's the answer. He doesn't know himself that well, or else the whole way this remnant behaves wouldn't be quite as much of an unpleasant surprise. But he really seems to think that its slumped, defeated posture is the only thing that signifies. And it's like, yeah, but its eyes are filled with this like unquenchable rage, and it has gigantic fists. And that's not for no reason, sir. That's for beating things up. That's what those are for. So immediately my thought was like, oh, this thing is going to be really wild. Like, I was shocked that he thinks it's not going to put up a fight. And he says like he'll be wrestling dead weight. Zeal was worried integrating his remnant more closely into his body would slow him down. He had been lifeless for so long that the reality of his uselessness had settled into his soul. And Emrys says, you should expect a fight. Are you sure? It just sat there. And I appreciated him being like, all right, look. I mean, she's not a monarch for no reason. So if she says to expect a fight, I'm going to respect it. I'm going to be careful. And the reason that everybody's kind of tense here is because Zeal's advancement is going to destabilize him pretty significantly. And that's what Emrys is going to help with, because the advancements they're doing are supposed to happen over the course of literal decades, and they're doing them fucking weeks apart, if that. So it's going to put a strain on his spirit, and only like a monarch level power, and a monarch level power that is conducive to healing. I would imagine Yaren with her monarch powers, not only just because she's like brand new to this, but I would think that her particular paths aren't super helpful with healing. I don't know. But anyway, she's going to assist him once he's gone through this, because he's going to be kind of fucked up from it probably. So he manifests his remnant and gets what he is expecting, and it slumps to the ground as though its heart died years ago. Then it caught sight of him. Fire lit within the remnant's eyes, and suddenly Zeal felt the weight of an oppressive and overwhelming rage. The sight and feel of his own remnant in fury shocked Zeal, just for a moment, but the spirit seized on it. And what I find really interesting here is how everybody's remnants like behave toward themselves. Mercy's wanted to help her. You know, we already basically had the weirdness with Ruby and her wanting to help Yaren, and even though it wasn't quite a remnant, it was sort of doing the same thing that a remnant does. And I was thinking, you know, I already was asking this question, like, what would my remnant look like? I can't settle on what it would look like. But I was really trying to figure out whether my remnant would be cooperative with me. And I don't think it's only to do with whether you're an asshole. I think it has to do with whether you've got like a lot of self-loathing. And I do. So I feel like in that respect, it may not be super cooperative. Not in that it's like malicious or anything, but that it's sort of going to be like, why should I help you? Why should we work together? What are we even doing? What is this? Come on. You know, like that kind of nihilistic attitude. And so the fact that it reacts to him the way it does, I am sort of taking as that self-loathing thing a little bit. And he really starts to like, they have to wail on each other. And he's fucking his remnant up and it's fucking him up. And he's starting to get kind of worried about whether this damage that they are inflicting is going to result in a good enough bond to be worthwhile. I love this moment. It slammed itself against the invisible wall generated by the script circle, and if the barrier had been any weaker, the remnant would have torn its way through. Of course, a monarch stood on the other side. Yaren's red lock of hair fluttered in the wind kicked up by the force spirit, and she gave the remnant an unimpressed look. You like it better on that side, Yaren said flatly. Oh, Yaren coming in with the BDE, I love it. And it was a creature of pure rage and pain. It hated everything and wanted to destroy anything it could reach, itself perhaps most of all. And Zeal is just really sad. Like, just, God, this is it? This is me? Which, I mean, I think a lot of us wouldn't love what we saw, you know? So maybe some of us would be pleasantly surprised. Sometimes we undervalue certain things about ourselves. And when it's in front of us, we're like, oh, yeah, okay. I guess I can be really compassionate or what, you know, but like, who knows? Who knows? So he starts to go after it. And the shield icon sang through him. Without it, he would have been destroyed in the first exchange. It kept him together as the remnant fell apart further and further, the fight slowly fading in intensity as Zeal and his spirit became one. He felt his body transform only once it was over. He stood in place, earth shattered around him. At some point, the script had been destroyed, and only Yaren's aura control kept the battle from spilling out further. I couldn't control the change as well as you could if you'd been paying attention, Dross said, but I don't think you ended up too badly. His horns were a little longer, but the biggest change showed in his skin. He was covered in scars where the remnant's fingers had torn pieces out of him, and those scars had been filled with a dull jade. Wild. I can't, you know, like, I'm trying to picture how this would even look, and it's interesting. Yaren says it looks like we traded scars, and he doesn't even remember that she had them, which is a really great example of how completely inside himself he was, like just not observing the world around him, too overwhelmed with sadness and loss to see clearly. I get that. I really do. And then it says, he fell steadily onto his face. Can you get Emrys, please? Zeal asked Dross. Yeah, that instability is pretty bad, isn't it? Good thing we planned for this. Sorry, she's busy. I'll try again in a few minutes. Zeal lay face down in the dirt. No rush. That cracked me up. Bunch of people in the chat. Sorry. MX Shard says, I wouldn't be surprised if Mercy and Zeal may be setting some records for shortest time between Herald Monarch and Sage Monarch from what we've seen. Malice and Northstrider spent decades as sages. B. Moore says, I think I would have preferred Zeal having a lethargic remnant that he eventually finds common purpose with in protecting others. His anger has just never been that big of a component of his character, and beating it up doesn't seem like it really resolves anything. I'm going to give a hard disagree with that, B. Moore. His rage has been I felt a pretty significant component. It's just been buried, but it's definitely always been there in my mind. And I talked earlier about how he has had to be dragged through every step of this process up until very recently, despite allegedly wanting to fight the Dread Gods and wanting to get his, wanting to heal and wanting to take down specifically the sage that fucked his entire sect up. He claimed to want that, but he wasn't willing to take the steps to do it and didn't believe in it and had to be forced, essentially. He isn't a cooperative guy. He finally reached a point where he started to see it was possible and get a little bit hype. But it took so long for him to really even admit it was a possibility to himself. This, basically being you are going to fucking do this. Get off your ass. That feels right to me. I don't know. And Emmett Shard says the jade scars are so cool. I'm picturing those gold repaired statues. Oh yeah, I can't remember what that's called, but that was just a thing on Ted Lasso that I'm covering with Rashawn, is a dish repaired with gold, and that being a Japanese art form. Andy says, remember him going from uncaring to berserk in the Uncrowned King tournament? Exactly. It was simmering right there underneath, and all he needed was to come across somebody from the Storm sect. I can't remember what they were called. And he completely lost his shit. It's just it was right simmering right below the surface, and he just needed a poke in the right spot for it to come out. But otherwise, he was he didn't want to heal. It felt like in some ways he wanted to in theory, but in practice, not so much, which honestly, can we just all stop and think about that? Because how many of us are coping with that kind of vibe right now? I want to get better, but slow. I want to get better, but I don't want to do the things that I know will make me feel better because I don't really believe they're going to work. And even if they did work, I don't really believe that it will ever get that much better. Even if I feel slightly better, it's still going to suck. Or, worst of all, they do work. And you didn't have to be suffering like that the whole time. And you let yourself, and now you know you can get out of it, but that it takes work. And now you have to admit to yourself, it's possible, but you just don't want to do it. You just don't want it bad enough, which been confronted with that a little bit recently, personally. Jack says his anger felt like a steadily stewing thing for the time we've known him. Not loud, but always there. Megan says, to me, Zeal is such an embodiment of depression. 100%. MX Shard says, Zeal feels like a massive pile of embers. He looks burnt out, but get too close and there's still glowing embers under the ashes. MX Shard says, stir up an ash pile and give it some fuel and you can get a bonfire going again. Agree, Megan. I relate to him a lot when I'm depressed. Yeah, same. Just the whole, it's not going to get better. It would be great if it would, but it won't. I'm not going to try because it's a waste of my time. It's a waste of my energy, which I have very little of to begin with. So why am I going to spend it doing something completely futile? And also, I am such a fuck up already. I fucked up so badly, so repeatedly that I can't undo that. What I can do better in the future. That's lovely. I still have this hideous thing in my past that I can't make up for or undo. So what am I going to do? Continue to try and get better and then maybe fuck up again? go through all of that pain again? Oh, that sounds super fun. Let me get right on that. Like, I get it. I really get it. So anyway, this is when we go to Mercy and Emrys. And Mercy is talking about how everything that she saw in the ideals her mother wanted are not what she wants. She just isn't interested. It's not important to her. That sense of like domination and ultimate power. She's just not, that doesn't, And she says, Emrys says, those are what she strove for since she was a girl. Osmanthus advised the young Void Sage to consider how others saw him, to use their perception of him as a looking glass to glimpse how he was reflected in reality. He was instructed to look for a concept that defined him even in his childhood. So tell me, Mercy, how do people see you? And Emrys uses some abilities to drop some memories and ideas with Dream Aura into Mercy. I really loved this. They were her mother's memories. Malice looked into the future to name her direct descendants and highlighted what she saw as their greatest feature. Not all Akura clan members got this treatment. At some point, naming family members after virtues had become tradition rather than actual prophecy. But now, with Dross and Emrys to sort the memories she'd absorbed, she saw Malice in her visions. And she named him Fury. His daughter was a dark statue surrounded by owls who wore a cold mask. Malice looked closer and saw the girl spreading messages and monitoring the well-being of the people, uniting them to stand against the powers of the wilderness. Mercy saw her mother named Justice Pride and several other family members. Finally, she came to her own vision. Mercy was still only a baby, still wailing when Malice looked into her future. She saw her youngest daughter with a broad smile, clear even on the dark statues in the world of night. She healed, she laughed, and she cried for the sake of others. And in the end, Malice saw her daughter as another light rising over the dark mountains of the Akura clan. And what I really liked about this, you guys remember how I was a little bit disappointed when Mercy was looking for her revelation to get to Sage? Not Sage, she's Herald. It was Archlady, right? And I was feeling like I wanted her to come up with her own vision for herself, but that she bowed to what her mother's vision of her had been. And it was like, I sort of saw it as her continuing to like take her mother's view on things when I really wanted her to break out of that. And I fucking completely failed to think through that what her mother saw was from her prophecy. That wasn't just like, this is what I see for my daughter in terms of just a general desire or what I would like her to strive for ideally. I completely fucking forgot that Malice could literally see the future. So when she was like, Malice saw her as a bright light in the darkness, I was like, literally, who cares how Malice saw her? Oh my God. That's very literal. It's so, I'm picturing it as just like, this is how my mommy thought of me. No, it's like literally the future she saw for this individual child in fate, which completely changes my interpretation of like how that all went down. And I do not know how I forgot that. So everybody forgive me, because I can be real, real dense. There's a lot to keep track of in these stories though also. So, So it says she would be a light to complement the shadows, the mercy to counterbalance the family's malice. Where the monarch failed, her daughter would bring joy. And I'm like, well, you weren't wrong. You just weren't thinking as literally as it turned out. You know? Oh, God. And when she comes out of these memories, Mercy is just like, I don't fucking feel joyful, though. And Emerus is like, that's not it. You bring it to others. That's not necessarily to yourself. Sorry for it. But like, and that is the thing that I think is kind of compelling about this, is the looking at it from the outside instead of how you're feeling. It's how you affect the world. And we find out that the joy icon is a flower, which I really, really didn't expect either. I was theorizing about what her icon was going to be. And I think I said something like, would it be a heart? And I thought that would be kind of weird. And Charity, I guess, like the Sage of the Silver Heart, I guess hers is a heart, like a symbolic heart, not like a representation of a human heart, I'm assuming. But have we ever actually found out what the Sage of the Silver Heart really means? I feel like I don't remember if that's been outlined very specifically. But the joy icon being a flower, I really like that. It's a specific kind of, when I think joy sometimes, I tend to think of like exuberant joy, like the joy of seeing somebody in person after a long time apart and like throwing your hands up and being like, oh my God, you're here. That kind of joy. But joy isn't always that bright and loud. Like, I experience deep joy lately with the puppies. They are like my sole source of serotonin at the moment. And that is a very deep, quiet joy that is something, it's like a drink of water. And so the idea of like a flower blooming, and it's like, it can be bright and beautiful, but it is also quiet and it is steady, you know? It makes a lot of sense. I don't know. I like it. I still really am trying to think, like, I would like to manifest the humor icon, the laugh icon. I do not know what that would look like, though. Like, you know, I feel like that's too close to the joy icon, but I don't really know how that would even work. I really want to make people laugh, though. That's like, and also care about each other. I want to make people care about each other. That's like, those are my two big goals, is to make people laugh and through that understand one another better and give more of a shit. So what is that? Compassion icon? Again, a heart. Like, I just keep going back to a heart, which feels not quite it. I don't know. So, and also the fact that, like, we've talked, I had already mentioned about how there seems to be a lot of like Ethan's accomplishing things through his disciples, basically. I don't love that word because it sounds so much more culty, but we literally have cults and sects in this book, so I guess that's fine. But he wanted to manifest the joy icon, and he wanted to bring people with him on his journey. And Lyndon has done this, and Mercy has done this, and just how they're filling the gaps in his life in a way that doesn't feel like he's forcing it on them. They're finding their way to it, and he used the fact that he wasn't able to do this for himself to guide them to not make the same mistakes as he did, but not and overbearing, domineering kind of way. I'm just going to, in a lot of it, trust that you are going to do the right thing here. You know? I don't know. So let's see, here it is. Oh yeah, she felt Zia lying nearby. He felt like a cold star, a bottomless well of power covered over, like he was dead. And she gets a little worried, and Emrys is like, he's fucked himself up, and there's consequences to that. So we're going to have to do some things. And she says, you should experience relatively few side effects. This is hard enough as it is. At least the boy could have left me the whole gem. And I don't know if the gem... Is this something that... Because it says Mercy noticed a chip missing from the Queen's gift and wondered if she had been supposed to hear that last part. Is there a part of this gem that we saw be used somehow? I'm really curious about it. I don't remember this. But, yeah, she says, be whole. And that, let's see, I'm trying to see what changes about the way that Mercy looks. I can't remember what changes happen, but I don't know if there are any. No, I don't see anything here. It seems like Mercy mostly, her change came when she advanced to Herald and her hair and whatnot. That was what changed. So I suppose that's the end of that. Let's see, there's a bunch of folks in the chat again. B. Moore says, the view of Malice really gets twisted around this book. It seems like Malice deep down didn't like her own nature. She didn't like what she wanted, and she saw Mercy as a sort of salvation that would produce what Malice knew she should want. A clown mask with a big red nose for the laughter icon. Oh god, that's so scary. No. I'm bored says, I just realized as you said that Ethan was named after a flower. Oh, I forgot that. Which adds another layer of tragedy to his desire to manifest the joy icon. B. Moore says, passing the torch rather than brandishing the whip. The gem is the one of the things Linden and Yaren stole. It was concentrated bit of nine cloud authority. Okay. So Megan is saying we haven't seen it. Okay. Noted. B. Moore is saying it seems like Malice didn't like her own nature. I'm not sure that I agree with that. I think that Malice, at the time of these namings, was probably not quite at the intensity of this, like, power-hungry thing that she really got going on the more that the family was threatened. And she was clear-eyed enough still to understand, I need somebody to check me. And because of the reaction, remember that she had to Mercy being like, you've needed somebody to stand up to you. And her sort of acknowledging internally that Fury played that role. And then once he was gone, there was nobody to sort of be like, bitch, what are you doing? And I think she understood she needed that at that time and was encouraging it in a balance, not as like a dislike of herself, but understanding I'm going to have a foil to keep things even. And just as she began to lose sight of those things, the desire for a balance completely went out the window. So, okay. We go at this point to Surreal. And this is such a weird scene because, like, so she got thrown into the void with some fiends. She deals with them, but it does fuck her up pretty good. She gets back into the situation, and the Mad King has been pretty well fucked up. She takes the Mad King out completely, and he is gone. It says there was no fiend's shadow behind him. Othkimeth must have escaped while she was in the void, which was itself worth investigating. And I'm just like, what happened to it? I'm really worried about this thing going somewhere and turning up again. I don't know if that's even, So that bothers me. And then Machiel is like, so are you gonna bring back Osriel? And she tries so hard and she can't do it. And she's getting pissed because on the one hand, him dying in this way is just very dumb. On the other hand, she's like, he fucked up so bad and he's barely seen any consequences yet. He can't just die. We've got to like really make a point with him. That's not fair. It's a real easy death. And then all of a sudden, she feels Machiel using his power alongside her. And it says, Machiel is in contact with Tal Galore, her presence informed her. If she hadn't been so totally concentrated, the possibility would have chilled her. What was Machiel doing communicating with a Vroshir homeworld? Together, he and the remaining crew of the fortress could shut down her working. They could ensure that the Reaper remained lost. And I was like thinking here, is it possible that Othkameth went into Machiel? And that's where he went. He didn't like bail. He just found a host. But I don't know how that works. And I don't think Machiel would let him in voluntarily. And I don't think that he can come in without being accepted and invited. I'm assuming. I don't know. And when she's like, what are you doing, dude? He says, I'm helping you. I'm not as skilled a phoenix as you are, so I'm borrowing the systems of Tal Galore. And she's just like, wait a second. Machiel, stop. My name was Thomas, he said, and I intended to give up my position on our return anyway. Consider this my revenge. When she realized what he meant, she gave one dry laugh. He will hate this, Suriel agreed. So he basically gives his life up to give her the ability to bring back Osriel. And as soon as he comes through, he knows already that Machiel is gone. And I'm like, is he going to take Machiel's place? Like, what exactly is he doing? I think he said that is he retiring his entire position? I retired my position. Yeah, so there's no more the Hound. What does that mean then? So then we jump to Linden. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this. I am just going to say Linden is doing poorly. He's handling his shit and he isn't dead. But it's like a split second away before he's dead when Yaren comes in. And she can see how close it was. And she is really fucking pissed at Dross and feels like he could have had her come through sooner. And it wouldn't have been such a close thing. And as they're fighting, he says, like, which dread god would you like? And they go off and take the Bleeding Phoenix while he is going to deal with the Titan by himself. Zeal's muttered voice sounded like it was coming from next to Linden's ear. Advance to Archlord, he's a sage. Advance to Sage, he's a dread god. Advance to Monarch, he's off to kill a dread god on his own. A moment passed and then Zeal's voice came again. Dross, you didn't send that to him, did you? That cracked me up so bad. So we have more exchanging of blows, and it says, in Suriel's vision so long ago, Linden had seen it wading through mountains to destroy his home. In a way, it had succeeded. Linden rolled Suriel's marble in his left hand, watching those memories, and remembering the unsouled, destined to be one of thousands crushed beneath the dread god's feet. Now, a white halo hovered over Linden's head, and 9 flying swords spread out behind him, both made from the dread gods he'd killed. And this like, I don't know. So Wave Dancer turns into 9 weapons, right? I don't feel like I fully appreciated what Wave Dancer does now, other than being like, multiplying itself or whatever. If anybody feels like they want to give me a bit of a, what's the word I want? Cliff notes on like Wave Dancer's properties, I would appreciate it, because I'm really curious about. I feel like it was in the midst of fighting Raygon Shen that he pulled Wave Dancer out the first time, and I was so distracted by just overall everything that was going on that I didn't stop and give it the attention that I intended to when I knew he was remaking it. So then we jump to chapter 29, and I knew this was going to happen, because we saw Shamiara and Emrys sort of being like a little chummy. I feel like the middle of the last book or end of it. And so when she showed up, I was just like, this, she's not really with you, buddy. I don't think she's actually with you. I couldn't tell. And he is trying to tell her how Emrys is just a born liar. She has been acting this whole time. My favorite thing about this is he's not wrong about the fact that she's been acting the whole time. He's just being completely dishonest about what her motivations for acting would be. He fucking acted. He was out here ready to free the Dread Gods, right? And he was not being honest with anybody about what his goals really, really were in that domain. So he was lying, and also let everybody believe that he had to make soul oaths like a normal person when he did not. He is so dishonest. Emrys is lying because y'all already killed her once. So, it's like the reasoning for what she's doing is extremely valid. And if you all knew the position she had been taking from the start regarding this whole thing, you would have killed her again. You would have all gotten together and killed her. You would. You would. So it's just hysterical to me. The whole, Miara asks him, is ascending really so bad? And he's like losing his mind. This is the world we worked for. We don't owe it to anyone. And I'm just, oh God, isn't that such a thing? You don't owe it to anybody, but they owe it to you to be sacrificed by the Dread Gods so that you can stay here. They get to die. What an honor. And he is like still under the impression that she is on his side. So she's grabbing one of Yaren's techniques, and he is feeling a little bit of begrudging respect for that. And all of a sudden, Yaren's black and white slash crashed down on him like the swing of a heavenly scythe. The attack had been carried by rainbow-colored Madra. And I was just like, oh, shit. And he is shocked by this. And she looks at him and slashes at him again. Shamiara does. I know this was difficult, said Emrys, but he couldn't be trusted. He was the one who couldn't be trusted? Yes. Correct. Yes. Yes. And again, yes, sir. I don't know how he can say this with a straight face. And like I do know because people do this. But also, oh my God, sir. It's incredible to me how you flatter yourself as like the honest one in all these what are you fucking smoking, dude? What is in that goblet? I mean, honestly. So he tries to talk, coughs up all these sparks. I really enjoy this moment. Shamiara says, I knew he was going to give me up. He betrayed Tiberian too. I was just using him until the time came. Rhaegon shouted at her in his head. She hadn't seen a thing. 5 seconds ago, she was a panicked mess. Shamiara was just trying to jump ship. I mean, you're faithless, though, dude. You were, maybe it wasn't in your head exactly. You probably were, though. And she lifts her sword and starts to bring it down on him. And he uses a consume technique with the Wraith Horn to pull Madra out of her, and uses a portal to get out of her way. But he is still broken in half internally. And he tries to heal himself, but that is not the authority that he really carries. And because he went through a portal, he's in front of Tiberian Aurelius. And you guys, I wanted so much for Tiberian to kill Rhaegon Shen. And I guess just being there for his death is pretty close. I really want to know, Rhaegon's dead. What happens now to Tiberian's remnant? Is he just fucking chilling in this portal now forever? I would really like for somebody to let him out, please. And also, of course, Rhaegon's remnant is in there as well. I feel like maybe we could do something with this. I'm just saying, we got 2 monarch level remnants. Yerin's, she was the one who was dealing with Malice's remnant. Did they keep it or did they kill it? I'm assuming they killed it, but I don't know that actually. And Tiberian has such a fun line. I see you had too big a dose. You see, it's always best to take small sips when you're drinking your own medicine. So, as a last-ditch effort, Rhaegon tries to ascend, and his will is fading too fast and too much for him to connect with the way. And Tiberian says, I admit this would not have been my first choice, but I suppose we're going to get to know each other better from here on out. Maybe you'll make a better spirit than you did a man. Lion, Rhaegon tried to insist. I was always a lion. But when his remnant rose from his body, it was in the shape of a man holding a goblet. And there's something about him not actually being the lion that he always imagined. I really liked that he kept telling himself that he was one thing, but had lost touch so completely with that. That feels right. That's sort of the vibe with a lot of the monarchs, is that they had used to be representations of certain ideals or pursuing certain ideals, and there came a point where that just stopped being as important to them, and their personal power took precedence over everything else. So we jump back into Lyndon's head, and he asks Strauss as they're closing in here, how long will I have to say goodbye? I can't figure out a way to say you can't do it that doesn't break your heart. If they do leave, how long before I'm stable again? You could do it in a year or 2, but don't get mad if it takes longer. I have the feeling you'll get mad. A year? Lyndon could make it a year. Or longer, Dross reminded him. I'm like, yeah, a year or 2. Or longer. And he's immediately like, I'm going to go to the shortest of all of the potential outcomes here. This is like when you look at something and they show you like a car and they're like, starting at $25,000. And you see that it's like, click on it, $25,000 to $65,000. But of course, do you think of it as a potentially $60,000 car? No. You go to the low one. Look at this. It's only $25,000. So, let's see. Lyndon wished Dross hadn't said anything. He wasn't ready. This had gone so fast. And then we get a series of moments of Lyndon looking at each of his friends and thinking about where they were when he met them, where he was, and what they have gone through together. And it's like the kind of thing that I appreciate why it's happening right now. It did feel a little bit clumsy to me, but also it's the kind of thing that I believe would work really well on film. I feel like it seems much more clumsy on the page because transitioning from the present fight into a memory it just seems clunkier when you're reading about it than it would be to watch the fight and then just sort of like overlaid a memory of just a moment from earlier on in the show or the movie. I feel like that I get what he's doing here, but it didn't totally work for me. It just seemed like it was so clear what we were doing. Oh, the end is near. Let's go over moments, and I just didn't seem as elegant as I feel like it could have been. Let's see. Lyndon remembered Mercy as a low gold in the sky sworn, unable to watch her mother do battle with a dread god. And that moment, like unable to watch her mother do battle, I understand that being the moment that's brought up because now she is fighting a dread god herself, but it's not the memory of Mercy that I would be thinking of in this moment. I would be thinking of Mercy getting off of Sue at the end of the Skysworn trials and then cheering for herself, like, that little moment and her being kind of wobbly. That's what I think of when I think of Mercy. And let's see. The Weeping Dragon's breath began to form, forcing the Titan to break off its attack and defend itself. Yeren took the opening. In a blink of white light, she appeared beneath the phoenix, condensing the final sword, the technique they'd named together. It stabbed up, and the bleeding phoenix stopped it with a claw. And he says break, and breaks the technique, and it pierces it. And then he gets hit with the Titan's tail. Little Blue erupts in a hollow domain and wipes out the excess energy and meets the strike. She stops the blow. Dross taps into the crown of the Silent King, magnifying his mental assault, and strikes at the Titan's mind. And the technique that had exhausted him before, it had almost cost him his life, just to make a weakened Titan retreat. This time, the wandering Titan staggered in place, its mind temporarily overwhelmed. And then we go back to Lyndon, and he brings down the dragon descends. The void authority darkened the sky as it had when the Reaper ascended. Its head was split, bleeding golden light, and it lashed out wildly. He consumed the Earth Madra with the right hand of the slumbering wraith. Through his body, veins of white spread, infecting him. His time grew ever shorter. If the monarchs remained any longer, he would lose himself. That was the price he'd chosen. So he begins to consume, and it's busting his body up and then replacing his body with pieces of the arm's flesh. Like, basically, he is becoming subject one the longer this goes on. It's rough, guys, because, like, I knew that this was something that could happen, but it being so quickly overtaking him, and in the midst of this fight in a way that, like, after they win, he can't say anything to any, like, he gets a brief moment with Yeren, very brief, and otherwise they just have to trust that he'll hopefully eventually be okay. And they don't even know that for sure because this hasn't ever happened like this before, you know? So let's see. Thanks to the temporary veil provided by Dross with the Silent King's crown, it didn't see Lyndon dashing up from below. Lyndon's empty palm covered the Wandering Titan's entire midsection. A dread god's spirit, being improperly fused to its flesh, wasn't easily disrupted, but this was the technique Lyndon had perfected the most. It was part of him. And this really made me think, you guys, about how Lyndon found the empty palm technique. And I think that I floated this idea at once we found out some more things. But do you think that was Osmanthus that used, because remember the way he found it, the empty palm was described as a really dishonorable technique used by somebody who was basically willing to cheat, and it requires pure Madra. And who else would have been seen as vaguely insulting and who used pure Madra and had techniques that folks had never seen before? I feel like it seems like an Osmanthus sort of thing. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. So let's see. Dross showed Lyndon what was about to happen. The Wandering Titan would slowly lock up from the legs first, like a puppet construct losing power and forgetting how to walk. It would at last lose the golden light in its eyes and become a statue. Dross assumed it wouldn't collapse under its own weight, but that remained to be seen. Lyndon couldn't watch it happen with his own eyes because it would only take a few seconds, and in those seconds he had another dread god to kill. If the Wandering Titan really died, his own transformation would progress while the Phoenix grew too powerful. And I was like, oh, right. Because, was not considering that aspect of things, guys. I really was not. So, he heads toward the Phoenix. And this is when the whole thing really begins to, speed up with his flesh being replaced. And let's see. From the outside, Zeal's techniques fell like hundreds of hammers shaking the dread god. Mercy's arrows stabbed into the mind and spirit, carrying heavy shadows. Orthos and Little Blue drew liberally from Lyndon's cores, and the 8-man empire, while Lyndon was too deep in the Phoenix to sense which paths were theirs, but they felt like they were using power of all aspects. And he uses the empty palm over and over and over again, while feeling how the Titan is almost dying. And he's just like, oh God, am I going to be able to make this work? Yaren shuddered. Tell you true, this is the last place I ever wanted to be. Lyndon looked down at himself. The slumbering wraith's flesh grew out of him from everywhere. Apologies. Yaren had tears in her eyes, but her smile was brilliant. I'll tell Ethan to save you a seat. Now let's get this bird to die. The void icon resonated the same tone as the death icon, and Lyndon joined his will to hers. Die. Their technique tore apart the Phoenix from the inside out. 2 dread gods died at the same time, leaving only one. And I was just like, can we not? Can we not talk about Lyndon like he's a dread god? Look, I know technically he's a dread god. I know he's technically a dread god. I don't like it, and I would like to not refer to it. And I would like to not refer to him in this manner. It's extremely disrespectful to the reader. I don't appreciate it. Okay? So, just so we're all clear, I reject it. And I just want to be on record with that. I'm just saying. So, let's see. Oh yeah, so he passes out, and then he hears Dross saying he'll be fine as long as there are no monarchs. Get going. You can't really stab me. Oh, All right, fine, I'll tell him. God, I was lying before. And he manages to wake up, and we have Orthos coming in with Little Blue, who has shrunk down and is just riding on the tray. And when Orthos is just like, you should make yourself big again so that you can help me because you can't do anything when you're little. She's like, yeah, no, I know. That's why I'm doing this. Was that not clear? I'm explicitly making myself small so I don't have to help you. And I just loved her so much for that. Yeah, the whole point of this is that I would rather not work. So, here we are. Good for you, girl. Lyndon asks, did everyone make it? If they'd stuck around any longer, you wouldn't have. But yes, I saw them off myself. They went into that blue river that takes you to the heavens. Left all sorts of messages for you, but it's Dross's job to give them to you. How long do I have to wait? Lyndon asked. We'll find out together, Orthos said. And I have to say, it's such a comfort to me that Orthos and Little Blue are at least here. Because I kept forgetting that they aren't monarchs. And so when I was thinking about everybody ascending without Lyndon, I was thinking literally he would be completely alone. I forgot that they aren't at that level. So when they are here, thankfully, I was just so grateful because I really didn't. I wouldn't have been like upset at Lyndon being by himself story-wise. It would make sense to me, but I don't want to see that. That just sucks. You know what I'm saying? Like, so anyway, I'm really glad that not only that they are here, but that they're able to like give him more information about how things went down. I assume Dross could still have given him that info because even if Dross went unconscious with Lyndon, there are other Drosses that would have been conscious that I like to think could have given him the necessary info. But I don't know. Look, I'm going to say something right now that's kind of probably going to sound controversial. I am not totally sure how much I would trust Dross's word on some things. Because we have seen, I'm just saying, we have seen before that he can withhold information. He can be a little bit sketch when he feels like Lyndon doesn't need to know something. That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to insult you, Dross, but you can be a little bit selective. That's the nice way to say it. You can be a little bit selective, Dross. All right, so let's see what the next chapters are going to be. 30 and 31, 2 more chapters again. Ugh. You guys, this is the shortest section out of all of them so far. Because chapter 32, oh my God, yeah. So it's only 30 and 31 for the next recording. But after that, we've got a bunch of really short chapters. So it's 32, 33, 34, 35. I am going to die. It's only like 25 pages for this next section. Ugh. The only thing that I don't know, I'm assuming Emrys went with all of them, right? Because it's all monarchs had to go. So Emrys is gone. Shamiara would also have to go. But the thing with Shamiara is that they learned how to give the inheritance of a monarch to somebody who wasn't. So I don't know how that works with her. If she leaves, does that just like negate that? Is all that knowledge just gone forever? That would be kind of a shame. And also the 8-man empire, do they have to ascend? Because like collectively they can be a monarch, but they're not really. I'm assuming they don't have to be because they can just not do that anymore and not there. It seems like the 8-man empire's method of becoming a monarch temporarily is the way to do it. You get that power for what you need it for as a joint effort, and then you let it go, and everybody goes back to being themselves, and it's not a constant high power presence. That feels like the ideal that everybody should figure out how to do, and then we don't have to have monarchs anymore because we we become like a cooperative. But I don't know. I feel like that would be like they are very secretive about how they do it. And I want them to share. And that way we don't get more monarchs happening anymore. The main thing is, how do we stop monarchs from happening again? Right. So, anyway, oh, I'm sorry guys. There's so much stuff in the chat. I'm scrolling up a little. I'm bored is talking about Wave Dancer can summon storm clouds and basically infinite lightning. On top of that, the core binding of the Weeping Dragon was infused into it, allowing it to use the Weeping Dragon's breath attack. Right, which is dope. Sorry, there's so many things. Andy is saying Osmanthus didn't use excuse me, God. Osmanthus didn't use pure Madra, he used destruction Madra. Did he not also use pure Madra? What am I thinking of? How odd. I don't know where I was getting that. And I was like so sure, but now I'm stopping to think and I'm like, I don't know where I got that from. B. Moore says, Will has stated that the 8-Man Empire doesn't produce Hunger Madra. I think I remember you guys telling me that, yeah. MX Shard says, Miara took the inheritance with her and 8-Man Empire sages and heralds. Even if they add to a Hunger Aura, it's an occasional drop, I would assume. My understanding is a little vague. Andy says, when he came back as Athan, he switched to Pure Madra. Ah, that's where it is. Thank you. Because I was like, am I crazy? I could have sworn. Okay. Appreciate you, Andy. Now I really wonder who it was. Who was out here using Pure Madra? That's crazy. I really want to know who that was. I don't need to. It doesn't have to be like it was secretly so-and-so. You know, like, oh, he time traveled and left himself the book. It was Lyndon all along. Like, I don't need that. But I am curious if Will has thought it through. I feel like he is the type to think everything through. So, all right. So I'm going to wrap up, guys. I'm going to see you on Thursday with 2 chapters only. Deeply sad. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.